Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. We are very pleased you could join us today. And just before we begin, we'd just like to, in advance, make you aware that today uh, we've been facing some very powerful energies, some lots of activity. There is some astronomical slash astrological phenomena that are taking place related to Mercury. And this has been causing us a great deal of, mm, what's the correct word here? Activity. And it's been difficult to discern what precisely the nature of that activity is. And so there is a risk that at any moment during this live stream, we might even have a seizure. So we just want to bring that to your attention so that if for a few moments during this live stream, if we seem to zone out and just seem to go away, then we might be having a seizure. So we just wanted to draw that to your attention. So what we're going through is something that we're being overtaken as we speak. Okay. 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 All right. Okay. Hmm? Hmm? Uh, so if you're still tuned in, we were trying to find something on the computer to to show you, and we haven't been able to locate it. So we're going to have to um, play something else here. Um, so let's see. You guys been keeping track of our YouTube channel, because we've been releasing some videos related to the book. We're putting out some new videos, and we haven't really publicized them on Facebook yet. We were planning on doing that this week. So, but yeah, I think we can. Let's see if we can bring you guys up to speed on what's been going on with regards to some of these videos that we've done. But we also did some previews for the book, and that's what we were trying to get on screen for you. But we're just having some difficulty getting these all arranged. So we hope everybody's having a good weekend. We also had someone drew attention to the fact that we had a pretty big error in our audiobook. That chapter one of part one of our audiobook cuts out at 3 minutes and 8 seconds, and the rest of the chapter is missing. And so we are now taking steps to get in touch with our publisher to see if they can get their audio engineers to figure out what went wrong and get in touch with ACX to upload a complete version of that chapter back to the audiobook. We'll have to see how that unfolds. We don't know. We don't have any dealings with ACX on in this capacity, so we'll have to see if we can get a completed version of chapter one online and get this audiobook problem fixed. But because for now, it's obviously it's not a complete chapter, and so hopefully we'll have that that fixed sooner rather than later. But again, we don't know how long these things take between the audio engineers and the uploading, and then and actually changing the files on the servers and getting all that up to date on the um, Audible's online library. All of that needs to be able to take place, and so that's who knows how long that'll take. Maybe it'll take a few, 24 hours. Maybe it'll take a few days. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see. As for this astronomical event involving Mercury, Mercury is related to the intellect and communication, of course, but the mind and also the nervous system. So some of you have been describing anxiety and some other things that you have been feeling. In addition to all of that, we actually had a breakdown in our furnace overnight, and it was minus 10 degrees Celsius. This was the first day of the winter here where we live in Canada where it was that cold, minus 10. And on this night of all nights, when we got down to minus 10, this is the night that the brand newly the newly installed furnace that we installed back in, I guess, November or October, something like that. On the first night that the temperature dips below minus 10, that's the night that the furnace conks out. The heat conks out. The furnace was going, the furnace was working, but it was blowing cold air. There was no heat. So the temperature in the house kept going down, and the so-called smart thermostat was telling the furnace to turn on and to blow air, but there was no heat in that air. So it didn't matter how much the thermostat was telling the furnace to blow air, the temperature in the house kept going down. So we had that to deal with this morning as well. We had to call the emergency number, and the repairman had to come out and fix a problem with the furnace installation that was causing this problem. And so it was just, today was just a day of issues and problems. And it wasn't exactly Mercury in retrograde. We're not an expert on these astrological and astronomical phenomena when they take place. But it was, Mercury was involved. So we all are relatively familiar with when Mercury is in retrograde. But this was Mercury, was it Mercury in alignment with the moon, or in alignment with our star sign, or what exactly it was? But it was behind a lot of these, like, these issues and problems. And so, or at least we've been dealing with them. We've been feeling them and coping with them all day. So just sharing that as well with you. Today, we said that we were going to talk about what it was like to be a we, as opposed to being an I. And we promised some practical case studies that you could take to the bank, as it were, that you could use as a guide in your own self-observations. We know that one of the important exercises on the path to awakening and self-realization is the path of self-observation. We cannot know ourselves if we don't observe ourselves. That is just a fact, an objective fact. You cannot know what you do not observe. It is impossible. You cannot know what you do not experience. It is impossible. But in order to experience, you have to be observant. You have to be open and willing to receive that experience of yourself. You must be open to that. We call that self-observation and self-remembering. Remembering that there is a being there within you, your being, your beingness, your essence, your true self. Remembering that. And then being in observation of the impulses of said being. And to know the difference between a being impulse and one of the other impulses we receive from one of our many egos. The impulse to react with fear or anger or envy or greed or gluttony or laziness. Those are also impulses that impact us. And that's why we have this word when someone is said to be impulsive. Oh, look how impulsive they are. They can't control themselves. They have outbursts of anger or outbursts of sadness, or they'll just, whatever comes to the top of their head that comes out of their mouth, or they see a big bowl of Doritos and they eat half of it, right? Without so much as a word, without so much as a thought. They act on temptation. They act on their desires impulsively. But then there's also the being impulse. The impulse which we receive from our higher self. And being able to taste the difference and recognize through that tasting, through that experience of these different varieties of impulse, to be able to know the origin of that impulse. Was it from our lower self, or better expressed, was it from the adversary, or was it from our true self? The word that we use is discernment. And we use that word in conventional language. That word discernment is used in the context of someone who has discerning taste. And this is why when we described being able to taste the difference between an impulse from our true self and an impulse from the false self, our many egos, our many eyes, there's a flavor there, there's a taste, a texture, there's an experience of that if we can recognize the difference in value, the difference in quality of one over another, just like the discerning connoisseur that is said to have discerning taste over an award-winning wine versus a boxed wine from the grocery store, right? This is what we say. Oh, they have such discerning taste. The ability to discern an art house film versus a Hollywood, blockbuster paint by numbers piece of trash, right? So it's that same quality, is that having the ability to recognize through the experience of something its innate nature and quality. That's discernment. And that is the underlying ability, awareness, capacity that we must cultivate and develop inside of us in order to recognize that we, the mortal vessel, may identify as an I, but that I is, number one, a multiplicity. It's a multiplicity of desires, a multiplicity of mechanical agents that all announce themselves to us in our own psyche as I. I want this, I don't want that. I am this, I am not that. They're all playing. We have a video that describes this in detail, and we've remade these videos now, um, and we've remade them, and we've broken them out by topic, and we can show you. Where is it? Okay, so this is the one that we would show you. But in order for us to do this, we need to present, and we're going to try to share the screen, but we're going to share this. Okay, so we're going to press play here. You guys tell us if you can hear the sound. We're gonna mute ourselves. The next step in understanding the human condition is this word condition. The first part of condition, con, means with, but it is also slang for confidence artist, one who exploits our naivete via deceit, persuades us to believe their lies. This relates to with, meaning accompanied by or in possession of. The second part of condition, dition, is an archaic term meaning state. And by state, we can mean rule, power, control, dominion, or government. But state also refers to the form or arrangement in which something exists. For instance, the states of matter. The condition of humanity, then, is a state of naivete exploited by persuasive forms of deceit which possess and rule humanity. A true human consists of the five senses and ego mind we experience our physical world with, plus direct knowledge of the metaphysical world we only experience being in a conscious state. The actual human condition overrides conscious experience of being with the ego mind's beliefs and disbeliefs about the metaphysical and physical world because of not being in a conscious state. Genuine knowledge is displaced with endless competing theories, beliefs, opinions, and judgments. An individual unaware of the metamind of being is just a lone rational hominid with their psychology exposed to external conditioning and manipulation by egos, our many eyes, the equivalent of psychological malware. The rational hominid is not being. So we got a 10-4 from Benjamin. So you guys could hear the sound all right from the video? We're assuming no one said that you couldn't hear it, so we are assuming that you can hear it. So the next part, we're getting into hopefully what matters here. We're going to once again we're going to play the video and once again mute ourselves. The question Shakespeare really poses is why, how. From Genesis and Faust to Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, our most revered stories and mythologies show us how temptation, the identification with desire, leads to the fall into hypnosis and ignorance, how that downfall creates confusion, turmoil, and suffering, and how ego blinds us from knowing ourselves and the world as a conscious experiencing being. For instance, we do not realize that we are not in possession of one ego, as modern psychologists believe. Rather, we are possessed by many countless individual egos, psychological malware, all of which present themselves to us as an I. Lust and gluttony, greed and envy, anger and despair, pride and shame, laziness and busyness, fear and control. This cacophony of mechanical, self interested psychological entities infects our five senses and constitute the ego mind we experience. Each ego presents its desires in the first person, an I. For instance, lust and gluttony express as craving, I want this, or aversion, I don't want that. Pride and shame express as identification, I am this, or rejection, I am not that, which are the foundations of tribalism, sexism, racism, and identity politics. The ego of fear and control may express and affirm a thesis, I believe this, but quickly turns to anger when said thesis is contradicted. They believe that? The seven kingdoms of Westeros play a dangerous game of thrones to rule the Iron Throne, and in that process cause a great deal of suffering, personified by Ramses Bolton and his pet Reek. Likewise, our many egos play a game of thrones to rule us as our I. We are tempted to identify with and indulge cravings and avoid aversions, pleasure and pain, us and them, life and death, good and bad. This dialectic hypnotizes our consciousness through the rational mind and makes us ignorant to all but our own blind self interest on the downward spiral of explosion and implosion. So that an explosion of ego, including temptation, hypnosis, and ignorance, leads to an implosion of life, including suffering, devolution, and not being. Case in point, an explosion of anger can lead to the implosion of a relationship. The nonstop dialectic of ego mind is what creates the cacophony of the busy mind. And yet, the dialectic is an illusion, as much a fabrication as the single false I we call ego, since both sides constitute the two aspects of the downward spiral of devolution and not being. It is this single I which divides and conquers us as it does Smeagol and Gollum in Lord of the Rings. Our inner pendulum swinging between irrationality and rationalism, atheism and superstition, chaos and order. On the downward spiral, our ego makes sure it is most precious to us, not only as individuals in microcosm, but in macrocosm as well, where the pendulum swings between the extremes of nationalism and tribalism, corruption and wokeness, extreme right and radical left, blind faith and blind dogma. And the world recently witnessed how an explosion of fear led to an implosion of society, economy, and civil liberty. This, then, is the Eye of Sauron and the Ring of Power. Be it okay. So we just wanted to show you that we've taken that. This was from an original video, but this that we did a while back. But the text comes from our book, and now we've broken this video out into parts. And this is part 2 of 5. So, and if you're interested in watching the entirety of that part, there's the link in the chat. But here's also on screen, and and this is just short of 10 minutes. This part of the video, but we wanted to show you this to just reiterate and remind you that these are many eyes, these many elements of our subconscious mind these egos that we have, we liken their activity to a game of thrones, this wheel going around and around and around. And when each one ascends to the Iron Throne, it announces its ascension to the throne. And it announces that ascension by announcing itself as an I. It's basically saying, I have risen to the throne. But it doesn't say, I have risen to the throne. It says, I want this, or I don't want that, or I am this, and or I am not that. It announces itself in some form of proclamation that rings in our that resonates in our rational mind as an identification and or attachment. And that is their annunciation, announcing their ascension to the throne, that throne of influence, that iron throne that's made up of all of these weapons of past rulers, right? Well, the Iron Throne is a symbol, it's an allegory for humanity in the Iron Age that's ruled by all of these weapons of these rulers, right? Who keep ascending to the throne because they're playing their game of thrones. They're playing this game of King of the Hill. And that is the inversion. That's the Black Lodge's version of the multiplicity which exists in the White Lodge, in the supernal worlds, because our innermost essence, our innermost intimate Christ, is likewise an individuated aspect, a spark, a seed of the Christ, which is the perfect multiple unity. But it's a multiplicity. It's a unity, yes, but it's a unity of a great multiplicity. In the same way that the illusory singular I that we identified here, represented here as the Eye of Sauron, that single pillar, or the unicycle, if we want to go back to part 1 of this video series. The Christ is a amalgamation and singular expression of an untold myriad of monads, of arisen and indeed Christified monads that have created their solar bodies and have embodied the Christ and are one with Christ, which is ultimately our goal on the path: self-realization, becoming one with our innermost essence of Christ. And then that realizing ourselves as one with the Christ, but not conceptually in the mind, but practically experientially in our consciousness. So we, meaning us mortals, us mortal vessels, we are in many ways the battleground where the tug of war, or the war for our soul, takes place between the forces of the Black Lodge, the forces of mechanical nature, these many egos playing their game of thrones, all vying to sit on the Iron Throne, and our innermost, our true self, whose rightful place is on that throne. And so then we are, in essence, Westeros. We are the world. And in esotericism and in philosophy, this was well known in ancient times, is that all of us, each and every last one of us, are the world in microcosm. and that the war for the souls of humanity is fought and won not out there, but in here, and in here, and in here, in our mind, in our heart, and in our body. This is the battleground. This is the world in microcosm. And if we think that as a vessel we can win this war, then we are gravely mistaken. We are just a vessel. What matters when you think of a vessel? What really matters? When we contemplate a vessel, is it the material the vessel is made out of? Think about a vessel which carries water. Does it have any value if it doesn't carry water? And what if it carries poison instead of water? What becomes of the vessel? It's the same vessel. Vessel hasn't changed, has it? Or if the vessel is impure, the vessel is dirty, it's filled with impurities, whether it's bacteria or parasites or just sludge and algae, you name it. And whatever you put into the vessel, even if it's pure water, will become tainted, become putrefied, will become a medium, a breeding ground for these impurities to thrive and multiply. So that whatever pure source of water we turn to fill our vessel up with, if our vessel is impure, if our vessel is unclean, then that which we fill our vessel up with just becomes a breeding ground for more of those impurities to multiply and grow. And then when we pour forth from that vessel, what we pour forth will be tainted and twisted and corrupted and impure and poisoned, ruined. So you see, no matter how you slice it, you are not an I, because unless you're uh, even if you are ruled by your subconscious mind and you are ruled by the metaphysical parasites, your many eyes, your egos, the singular I that they make you believe is who you are, that singular I that they convince you to become identified with and attached to, is an illusion. And what's really happening is your vessel is tainted and it's putrefying and poisoning any truth, any life-giving knowledge which you are accumulating and that you might potentially distribute and share with others in the world. But in the same way, even if you do manage to purify your vessel, when you draw water from the well or from the spring or from whatever sources or rainwater or what have you, you must receive that. You must fill yourself up and then pour it forth for others, for the sake of others, because that is what a vessel does. That is its purpose. A vessel does not receive water and take it on and store it for itself. The vessel itself has no use for it, but to receive it and then pour it forth. Because that's what a vessel does. It's like a ship, which only has one purpose. That's why we call it shipping. It takes on people or cargo, it takes them from A to B. Like any vehicle, like any vessel. Its purpose, its meaning for existence is what's inside, what it delivers, what it carries. Whom it serves. And so a vessel, generally speaking, is not alone. A vessel cannot receive by itself, and it cannot pour forth by itself. Somebody has to fill it up, and somebody has to pour it out. This is just objective fact. There is no bottle that fills itself, and there is no bottle that serves itself. And even though Elon Musk and countless others are trying to make vehicles that drive themselves, generally speaking, bicycles don't ride themselves. Automobiles, generally speaking, don't drive themselves. Canoes don't canoe themselves. Boats don't sail themselves. So to recognize oneself as a vessel, as a vehicle, by definition, one must comprehend that makes you a participant in a multiplicity, and that you are an essential aspect of a greater drama that is unfolding, a bigger story in which you are playing a vital key role. But you are a pivot point in that story. And that there is another, and more rightly put, others who are playing out this greater drama, this bigger story of which you are a part. And yes, a critical part, but just a part. And this is self-evident. This is, one cannot, the only aspect of oneself which would stand in fervent denial of this would be the ego itself, whose modus operandi is to convince you that you are one. You are I, me, myself, and I. And I'm the only thing that matters. And I'm the most important one. And I come up with the ideas, and I'm the hero of the story. I'm the hero of the story. Everything else revolves around me. And it's all lies. Right down to the idea that this ego, this false self, this perception of self, this identification and attachment to a singular entity called you or I, is itself hiding an amalgamation of many dozens of egos, of psychological malware, of mechanical nature's algorithms that are just playing their Game of Thrones. Let's take some chats very quickly, and then we'll continue. Azazil says, "We rarely forget what's been said. As we've said before, we're here as a friend, a co-traveler on the road, but it sure is a good thing to remember." And Benjamin says, "The second video is great. It clarifies the ego very well in making the comparison of the ego with the ring, for me at least." And Joanne says, "Can we contrast that against what Jesus said about if thine eye be single, thine body shall be full of light?" Um, Jesus was referring to the third eye. Joanne, that's not, Jesus was not referring to your being, yourself. And saying if you are an eye, then you'll be full of light. No, he's referring to the third eye. If thine eye be single. So that means you're not relying on these two physical eyes anymore, but you're now seeing the world through the eye of awakened consciousness. And yes, you will be full of light because it's the filling of yourself with light which awakens and opens that third eye. And Joanne says, "Thanks for the clarification. I thought, okay, thank you. I thought so, but for a moment thought there might be a connection. Thank you for the clarity." So the clarity on this point comes from part 1 of this particular video series, where we talk about the triune human being. And we can also, while we have the video, of course, part 1 of that video series that steps through that in a fair bit of detail, we also have included in, let's see if we can get to our page here. Let's present, and we are going to stop screen and let's share screen. Forgive us while we're just getting this on screen for you. Okay, there we go. So here, let's make that full screen. Okay, so there's our triune human being. So in the same way that we can say when your eyes become one, right? You have your physical eyes and then you have your third eye. That in a way maps onto this particular image, which shows Hume and Manas and being. And that the third eye relates to the being. It's the eye of awakened, it's the eye of the pituitary gland and pineal gland, which is illuminated and which relates directly to the being. So it's our capacity to see and know meta mind of being through consciousness. And it just so happens that if you think of the two eyes as these two wheels, then the third eye is at where the being is. This also relates to the Illuminati symbol of the all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid, which is really a Masonic symbol. But it's, again, that all-seeing eye is also relates to God. God's vision is singular. It's all-encompassing. It is the Alpha and the Omega. Draw a circle and put a point on the circle. It doesn't matter where you put that point on the circle, you encompass the whole universe of that circle. Because a circle, every beginning is its end. Every point on a circle is the Alpha and the Omega. But to draw a circle, the circle has a center. And to draw the circle, you draw a radius, you draw a line out from the center. We call it a radius. So the problem with alpha and omega in drawing a circle is that the true alpha of the circle is the center of the circle. We would call it, like in our diagram here, if we wanted to use the wheels, the hub is the center of the wheel. And its edge represents the omega that goes around and around and around forever. But the origin of the circle is its center. So in order to rectify this, because we can't have the alpha and omega can't be separate. God, source, cannot be separate from its creation. So in order to rectify that esoterically, what we do is we put a twist in the circle. And what you end up with is the Holy Eight, the sign of infinity. And that's where the symbol of infinity comes from. Oh, everything's going slowly today for some reason with this computer. Let's... blank canvas, please. Okay. There. Alpha and omega. Because we took the center of a circle and then we put a twist in it to create that. And from this vantage point, if you take this configuration and let's say we draw it like this, and we say this is everything above, and this is everything below, this vantage point allows your eye to be single and see everything all at once. But that connects you directly to the alpha and omega, so your individual essence, what in physical terms are people refer to as the 0 point. In esotericism and Kabbalah, we refer to as Yesod, the foundation, or the fourth dimension, which is the foundation of the physical universe. Everything below that point is physical, and everything above that point is metaphysical. So being able to work in the ninth sphere, or the fourth dimension, is how we awaken our eye that perceives from that point. And everything above that point feeds into it. And everything below that point we become aware of and able to see. Because this point is the ninth Sephiroth and the fourth dimension. But in order to comprehend that and the significance of that, let's look to our tree of life. We would have to be able to full screen. That flashed too quickly. Hang on a second. New. Snip in 10 seconds. Okay, so we're going to go this, and we're going to go here. So we'll just give it a second to do its snip. There. Okay. So does that mean snip? Full screen snip. Freeform snip. Okay, so if we did that, now we go there. So, yeah, okay. You guys see that okay? Oh, let's make this bigger for you. That might be a little small. Can we zoom that in for you, I wonder? Oh, we can. We can't, is there a hand tool? No. Well, we got to work with what we have to work with here. Oh, look, it let us zoom in, but it won't let us zoom out. That's ridiculous. There we go. There we go. So what you'll notice up here is in the upper trinity, okay, in the seventh dimension, we have the first and second and third logos. Okay, the second logos is the Christ, but then the third logos we call the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit underneath here, we have Divine Mother. But the Divine Mother is down here on the ninth sphere and the fourth dimension. The body of prana, body of chi. It's also the body of Divine Mother. So the Divine Mother descends, a divine feminine descends from the upper trinity of the tree of life down to this point. So in terms of what we are describing and what we are discussing, the scale here is off because we can't do it 50-50 because you wouldn't be able to read anything. But at this point, Yasod, the ninth sphere, okay, is the point of this 8. So it descends to create this point. And then we have the materium or the material, and then the plus the infernal worlds, beginning with the here's the physical body. Here's the third dimension, in other words. You have the third dimension and the lower fifth dimension. And then above, you have the supernal worlds. And we, the physical vessel, are down here in the third dimension. Right? We're the cup, if you will. But this cup also has a mind and an emotions, a intellectual center and a mental center, and that's shown here in these what we call the 4 bodies of sin. And this point, we should never forget that at this inflection point, we can go either way, which is why the vital body or the ninth sphere here, the sexual energy, it can flow up or it can flow down. Right? It can go that way or it can go that way. In esotericism, they call it the way of the archer, the way of the bow, the direct path, where we shoot the energy up the spinal column, as opposed to letting it, drain, right? Go down um, like getting flushed down the toilet. Okay. All of that is background to recognize ourselves. We're here, we're this. And that all this is going on and taking place, and everything down here in the infernal worlds, all of these demons, these egos, okay, they want this. They want to rule, they want to feed on and rule our sexual energy. And understanding that our consciousness here, the true self in the monad, this falls and falls again. It has to go through this process from where it is up here. It has to go down and it has to go through this inflection point and then go down again into the infernal worlds. We can maybe pick a different color here. So if this is the consciousness here, right? Draw it here. It's got to go. It's got to do this. It falls asleep, but it does so by falling and becoming attached, identified with, and attached to a desire, which is regulated, and which is after what is here in the fourth dimension. Because this is where temptation takes place. Because our egos, they tempt us, okay, through our physical body, our emotional body, and our mental body. But you see how all of these are interconnected, and what's in the center here is our vital body, our sexual force, because our egos tempt us through these other centers, but what they want us is to fornicate with them in each of those centers, to indulge those egos, to identify with them and attach to them and put precious energy into them, so that energy can flow down and out, can flow like this. And this, is the kunda buffer organ, the tail of Satan, right? And if we allow ourselves to fall into that trap of identification and attachment, and we allow all of these elements down here as they come up and tempt us, and that's why these are called the four bodies of sin, by the way. The four bodies of sin. If we fall for temptation, then our consciousness falls more asleep into temptation, and our sexual energy and consciousness fall into the hands of the parasites, which are doing the temptation, which are testing us. That's quite a mess. I don't know if you guys can make that out or not, but can we well, there should be a way to touch writing. No. Yeah, we can erase all ink, get it back to its normal state. Because there's another thing going on here, of course. Remember, we're a vessel. And the four bodies of sin even looks like a cup here. It even looks like a vessel. It's another triangle. Just as this is a triangle, or a triunity, a trinity, or triunity, but so too this is another triunity, which of course three as one, or triune. And this we make very clear in part 1 of that video series that we just showed you earlier. A triune human being is one between manas, and being. The the manas, shouldn't technically here, the manas and the being, the true self. Above this, we have the being of beings, Christ consciousness, right? We have the Christ. But here we have manas is meta mind or divine mind, that's gnosis, and the being is the monad. And here's the, so the monad is the human soul, the divine soul, and the innermost being, but three as one as the being, the monad. So a true human being is one with the mortal being, the mortal vessel, and the true self, the innermost being, and has the capacity through consciousness and through this vessel to bring meta mind or manas into the world as a vessel. But you see, by definition, this arrangement makes us a multiplicity, a we. Because the energy, the capacity, because this energy fuels the emotions, the mind, and the physical body. This is the foundation. This is our divine mother, the divine feminine force. But it's also consciousness. It's consciousness and energy. Because a portion of that has to come down in order to give emotions and thoughts in the physical body our capacity to experience them. So in other words, a portion of our higher self is sacrificed into the mortal vessel. And it's that consciousness that's descending into this vessel. And it's the relationship, the direct relationship between the sexual energy, the sexual force, and that consciousness. And we've explained this before when we talk about what real Tantra is, or what Tantra truly means. It's not just sex. The law of three is universal, and it applies on every level. In order to create experience, in order to create experience, you need a positive aspect, or a masculine aspect, and a feminine aspect. This is the positive or projecting aspect of consciousness must be received by the feminine aspect. So you have a projection, and then you have a reception. And when a projection is received, that is when you have an experience. This is self-evident. If you do not receive, if you are asleep while something is going on, you cannot experience that something going on. All your senses are turned off. You're asleep. You're unconscious. But this is the tantra of experience, of how experience and experiential knowledge, which is what we seek, this is how it's created. It's created through tantra. So experience itself, this is, by the way, positive and negative and union of positive and negative. This is the law of three. Again, another tri-unity or trinity. So a tri-unity may appear as one, but it's always a multiplicity. By its very definition, by its very nature, all of creation is a we. And so are you. And so am I. Or rather, so are we. This is still all on a conceptual level. And we can show it and we can explain it, we can describe it, we can map it, we can, diagram it, we can doodle it, we can do everything in the world with it. But how do we experience it? How do we know it practically in our lives? This is really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Let's just bring this back. Okay. This is where the rubber meets the road in the world of traction. Here. This is where being and manas, okay, they can't accomplish anything. They can't. Unless this rear wheel has a conscious connection to the rest of the bike and the one who rides it and the one who steers it and the one who pedals it. The effort, the super effort that it takes on our part is to maintain that connection, that link to that inner motivation, that being impulse that gets us to get up out of bed in the morning and take on the world, to take up our cross, our mantle, whatever it is, to face the challenges, to face the uncertainty, to face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. That's hard. It requires motivation. It requires inspiration. We can't get that from our Hume unless we rely on ambition, desire, greed. We turn to our lower self, aspects of our Hume, our physical, mechanical nature. We turn, and many people do, turn to their other multiplicity. But that multiplicity masquerades as an I. It creates this illusion of I, of me, myself, and I. And then the problem with that is, of course, that they take all the credit for anything that they do and all of their accomplishments. So even if there are accomplishments that are working through them, because they're actually they're following the front wheel on the bike, they will still take all the credit for it. because that's pride, and that's mystic pride, especially, where the ego, the rear wheel, starts taking credit for all the work of the front wheel and the being. And this is why we can develop as a hasnamusan, or as one with a dual center of gravity, which is kind of like the metaphysical or esoteric equivalent of a split personality, if you will. And all of us, to one degree or another, fall into that camp. Some of us more than others. But coming back to that practical connection, then, it is only by observing ourselves and remembering ourselves, remembering that we are part of a bicycle, and that properly oriented, in order to achieve, let's face it, what our true self, what the being is here to do, being is here to ride that bicycle and take it wherever he wants to go, whether it's up a mountain or across the country, or or whatever, or carrying a ridiculous load and delivering it, or being a bicycle courier in New York City, whatever it is. You use your imagination. Our role as an individual, as a vessel, in this analogy, is to translate the direction, the motivation, and the will of our being transmitted through us, through metamind and through motivation, through the being impulse, through willpower, to take all of that and put it where the rubber meets the road in the world of action, or the world of traction. But we, as a rear wheel, are supposed to stay in alignment with the front wheel. We can't be going off and doing our own thing in our own direction, right? Because bicycles don't work that way. That's why when people talk about being in alignment, this is what's so nice about this particular allegory or analogy. And one way that we know ourselves as a we is when we feel that alignment, and when we know we are in alignment. Because we are responding through our conscious connection, we are responding to the being impulse, which is coming to us through that crank. It's motivating us. We are giving that motivation, and we're following through on that motivation in spite of the resistance, in spite of the friction on the ground, or the gravity, the force of gravity pulling us back down the hill. Because let's face it, many times this bicycle is going uphill, because many times the path that takes us through life takes us uphill. It's very easy to ride downhill, isn't it? Like when we are on the Alm of life and we have to descend into hell, it's really easy to descend into hell. That takes no effort. It takes no effort to ride down a hill. But what about getting out of that valley that we just rode down into? We're now down in the valley. We're down in the depths. Now we got to get out of that valley. Well, that's another matter entirely. And all of us have ridden a bicycle at some point in our life, and we've all had to ride uphill at some point in our life. It's self-evident that the resistance that's working against us, mechanical nature, it's all mechanical nature. It's trying to keep us going down. Gravity and everything else keep us trapped, keep us going down. So it takes tremendous willpower, tremendous surrender, and to keep that connection, to keep that chain on the chain ring, and to keep ourselves in alignment with manas. Let's take a moment to pause here, back up. Benjamin Ochoa says, it also looks like the inner and outer implications in degree. So the inner and outer aspect of this becomes, our outer world is a reflection of our inner world, but there is, the ego wants us to become fascinated with the outer world, so we forget our inner world. Because the I wants to identify and attach itself to the outer world, whereas the innermost being wants us to focus on our inner world because it knows that the outer world is an illusion. But the I wants us to believe that the outer world is the real world and that the I itself is the foundation, right? That's part of the trick when we drew earlier. Oh, not that one. Where is it? What happened to our whiteboard? Did our whiteboard go away? There it is. Okay. So when we drew this earlier, remember, these are the internal worlds, and these are the supernal worlds and the infernal worlds. And yes, this is the third dimension is here, and this is the outer world. But all of this is where the ego wants to pull us down, right? Wants us stuck down in here, right? And our higher self wants us to ascend here, like in a balloon. And our ego wants, us to collapse in and get stuck down here at the bottom, right? That's hell. That's psychological hell. So the inner and the outer is part of that dynamic, part of that dividing and conquering us. Benjamin also says, and messing with our mind in the supernal. Okay, we don't exactly know what you mean by that, and messing with our mind in the supernal. The ego can't mess with our mind in the supernal. It messes with our mind in the infernal worlds. They're internal, but they're infernal. So our consciousness falls from the supernal into the infernal. That's what we were showing here, right? That's what we show here. The consciousness falls, and it's here where the egos can get at them. So the egos come up from hell to drag us down into hell. So aspects of our self, our consciousness becomes trapped in here, and more importantly, trapped in hell. That's why so many people, when they project into the astral plane, a lot of them don't realize they're projecting into the lower astral plane, the lower fifth dimension. They're not in the supernal worlds. They're in the infernal worlds. Like people who take psychedelics, and they think they know what reality is like. They think they know what the heavens are like because they're taking psychedelics. But psychedelics take you to the lower fifth dimension. It's entirely mechanical. Let's keep going here with the comments. As Azazel says, those are the two cups that the Divine Mother manages to perfect if we allow it. The two vessels, yes. We have our the vessel of the mortal self, and then we have the vessel of the higher self, because this is also a vessel. The true self is also a vessel. Because gnosis, knowledge, manas, as you see, the relationship there is that It is between the highest self, the highest being, and the monad. Because the monad is an individuated essence of the great multiplicity of the Christ. It's our innermost intimate Christ, which gains access through consciousness to gnosis via the great multiplicity which produced it. Because all the knowledge of the universe is collected into a single repository, and individuated essences, aspects of that great multiplicity, monads, who awaken and self-realize, gain access to that knowledge, and then through consciousness can, and their through their divine vessel and mortal vessel, can bring that gnosis into the world. And the reverse, through consciousness, through their experience, they can generate new gnosis through their experience. We describe this in detail using another analogy. And that other analogy is the, where are we? Here. That other analogy, oops. Let's just mute that. Okay. The rational mind is like a tugboat, and metamind, through our metaphysical vessel, our monad, is gnosis. And it's like a cargo ship. Well, a cargo ship can't come into port by itself, right? The tugboat is what brings it. The rational mind is what's able to bring the gifts of metamind into the world, right? Imagination, inspiration, intuition, insight, peace, and love and joy. These are what Einstein called sacred gifts. And that's what makes the rational mind a faithful servant. Without our help, right, we can't, the true self can't bring into the world its gifts because it needs a vessel, it needs a mortal vessel to do that. That's what we are, a mortal vessel. But this flow is bidirectional, because in the same way that that ship will offload its gifts, it will also get loaded up with new gifts, and that tugboat is going to take it back out to sea. So, in other words, the rational mind serves as this double duty to bring sacred gifts to the world through the rational mind, personality, emotions, instinct, vitality, etc., etc. These are all aspects of our hume, our physical vessel. But secondly, to seek new self-evident experiential knowledge. By experiencing, by being a vessel of experience, of being able to generate new experiences, and through new experiences, generate new experiential knowledge, self-evident experiential knowledge, which we become, in that way, a true human being contributing to the metaphysical world. Because that's what a vessel does, right? It carries things from point A to point B. It receives, or it gathers, and then delivers and pours out. So you can imagine this vessel going back and forth between the physical world and the metaphysical world. It can receive metaphysical knowledge and come into the world and pour it out and apply it in the world. Then it's empty again. And through the application of that knowledge, it can also experience and create new experiences and new knowledge, which it then gathers and takes as a vessel back to the metaphysical world and adds to the collective knowledge, the collective metamind of all the beings of the universe. It's a vessel, it goes back and forth, delivering back and forth. And let's not forget that in this analogy, we have this enormous vessel, this cargo ship, right? This is the monad. And the difference in capacity is what should be striking here. But that knowledge of the monad cannot come into the world without the cooperation of the mortal vessel, without the cooperation, without a faithful servant. That ship, right? That ship is going to be stuck out on the open ocean if not for the little tugboat that's going to bring it into port. That's the reality of the situation. And that's why it's so important that we serve and serve our inner master. But it's also a recognition that this is a team effort. This is teamwork. This little tugboat can't do the work of metamind, of the metaphysical vessel. This little tugboat is never going to be a container ship. And the container ship is never going to be a tugboat. They are two distinct jobs. They're two distinct functions. But when they're working in tandem like this, when they're working as a team, and the tugboat knows its place and knows its job and knows its purpose. We also use the analogy of wheelhouses, right? The difference in, what belongs in the wheelhouse of our tugboat and what belongs in the wheelhouse of our innermost being, of our container ship. What's in the wheelhouse of the mortal vessel and what's in the wheelhouse of the divine vessel. Because these two wheels map directly onto the two wheels of our bicycle analogy and the triune human being, which we described earlier. Because what's in the wheelhouse of the rear wheel is not the same as the wheelhouse of metamind. The front wheel doesn't drive the bike. The front wheel doesn't produce traction. The front wheel gives direction. It shows the way, it leads the way. Metamind leads the way. And the motivation comes through the crank, but through the conscious connection, the rear wheel is where we put that motivation into action, into traction, where the rubber meets the road. So what's in the wheelhouse of our being is not what's in our wheelhouse. As we awaken, as we become more self-aware and conscious and self-realized, and more of the being is coming into us and through us into the world, the more we realize that, yeah, I'm not an I, I'm a we, but also the more the rear wheel just does its job. And it becomes less identified and less attached to its desire to make us a unicyclist, which is the other relationship between this. Where do we have this? No, we don't have the unicyclist in this particular part. So, okay. Let's try to wrap up some of these questions and we'll get on to the next part. 2 cups, the way, okay, Benjamin says, the way of learning is feminine. Yep. That he's just referring there to the reception and the creation part of new knowledge. Benjamin says, is the dark side stronger? Yoda, no, quicker, easier, more seductive. Benjamin said this in relation to how easy it is to roll down a hill into the valley and how hard it is to climb up the out of the valley on the other side by comparison. Azazel says, the only thing that is really beneficial on our way down is balance. And Benjamin says, awesome, thanks for responding to my comments. Azazel says, our being once said, since you're going to fail, make sure to fail perfectly. Took us years to comprehend that. Well, there's a right way and wrong way to fail, I suppose. There's the failures that we can learn from, and the failures that set us up for more failure on the downward spiral. So there's wisdom to be gained there, but too many people take that to mean that because failure is necessity and suffering is necessity, that egos are required and must not be eliminated. So, because again, the mind, the ego, is always going to come up with rationalizations and tricks and traps to keep itself alive and in control and sitting on the throne. Benjamin says, oh, okay, thanks for clarifying that. Kamal Manzuki says, hello, Atlas. Glad to catch another stream at last. It seems the subject today is quite apt to a recent realization of mine about how much is going on in my head that I had no idea about. Well, we're glad to have you, Kamal Manzuki, and it's nice to see you back. We hope you're enjoying the start of a new year. And there is, in all of us, a lot that's going on all the time. The question is, are we aware of it? And when the first step is to become aware of it through self-observation. And then what we said at the beginning is becoming aware of it is one thing, but then the capacity to discern the sources of all of this activity and its purpose. And that discernment is key, and that's what we're going to get to now. Azazel says, yeah, like if you're going down really fast downhill, you're going to fall over the steering wheel if you suddenly hit the brakes. He says, then you're not really a bicyclist at all. In our in part 2 of that video series, when we're talking about unicycling, there's actually we actually used footage from extreme unicyclers. I don't know if you knew that there was such a thing, but there are extreme unicyclers. And where is our, yeah, here we go. Let's see if we can play this. Whoops. Let's make it bigger so you see it. And then, so you see these guys, the guy going into the tree, and okay, you see what unicycling is like? And when you're trying to go downhill on a unicycle, or even worse, the guy trying to go uphill on a unicycle, right? This is what happens, and this is the world trying to unicycle. Just trying to do everything with their eye, right? But the problem with the unicycle is that a unicycle, it's okay, it's inherently unstable, right? So you have the pendulum going back and forth. It's inherently constantly throwing you off balance. And then the other aspect of a unicycle is that you have no baskets. You have no place to carry anything, which means all the burdens of life, all the burdens in life that we carry, all the problems and everything, we have to juggle those ourselves. So there's plenty of people going downhill on their unicycle, and they're trying to juggle everything in their life and everything in their head at the same time. And naturally, where people do this, where do you see juggling unicyclists if not the circus? And naturally, we admire people who are able to juggle, right? On unicyclists. We admire these people. These people who are able to juggle and reach great heights. They ride these really high unicycles, right? They achieve great heights of wealth and power and worldly this and that. In the circus, these people are the most popular and the most successful because they ride the tallest unicycles and they juggle them. They juggle flaming torches and they juggle the most stuff. And the mob applauds them or marvels at them, right? This is called idolatry and fanaticism, fans and idolatry, and we look up and we marvel at these billionaires and this and that and the elite and these actors and musicians and sports figures, etc., etc., etc. But as Azazel points out, they're not bicyclists at all. Benjamin says, yeah, there's even a unicyclist doing BMX stunts. It's insane in context. Yeah, that's right. This is what it means, the difference between being an I and being a we. Because as an I, you're carrying all that, you're juggling all that by yourself. But as a we, one with your innermost, all you have to do is maintain your connection, stay in alignment with metamind, the front wheel. Maintain your conscious connection. Respond to motivation. When the crank is being pedaled, you turn. But that bicycle can have baskets on it. You don't have to carry the burdens. You don't have to juggle everything in life because the bicycle can carry the weight. The bicycle can carry the burdens. It's designed that way. All you need to do is be or not, is to be. To know your place as that vessel. To be Theodore. Because that tugboat that we were showing you earlier, that's Theodore. Theodore means gift of God. The vessel who delivers the gifts of God and who is God's gift. Azazel says, even Jordan realizes that there's something fishy with uni anything, certainly universities. Yeah, and he, you know what? He knows this intuitively. He's just like a cat scratching at the door. He can't synthesize, he can't bring it all together because logos is so far out there and it's so big and it's so incomprehensible and it's so unattainable. He's like the root tip, right? The capillary in a root tip trying to comprehend the trunk and the branches. He's missing the middle ground, the midgard, the root system that he's a part of. There's only one way, the tip of the root, which, yes, it's growing into the earth, and Jordan is doing good work here on the earth. He's following his innermost being. He is following, to one degree or another, this configuration. He is a vessel of his higher self. He's just not conscious and aware of it on this level. Like so many people, this mid ground, this middle layer has been erased from the picture. Look at all the Christians and all the other religious people in the world who pray directly to Allah and are trying to have a direct relationship with God. They don't realize that what they're doing is they're actually developing a direct relationship with their self. Their individuated essence, their innermost intimate Christ. But they're not consciously aware of that. And because they're not consciously aware of it, their relationship is somewhat delusional. It's somewhat illusory, and it exists in their mind as belief that they're having a connection with God, the creator of the universe, and that Jesus, and of course the Christians too, is their obsession with Jesus the man, and their inability to separate Jesus the man from the Christ, and to recognize that they have an innermost intimate Christ which must be born inside of them, which we discussed on Christmas Eve day on our live stream about the nativity, about the Advent, which is related to the word adventure. Azazel says, it's the busyness that is the door that stands in the way that lets the cat in. It is the busyness that is the door that stands in their way that lets the cat in. Well, we don't know about you, but this fellow looks pretty busy to us. And in fact, we show this in no uncertain terms when we relate that same graphic, right? When you relate it to the busy mind, there's your busyness. There's the juggling, right? But it's all in the mind. This is the busy mind. And we're juggling not just everything in our life, but we're also thinking about and worrying about the Kali Yuga and everything wrong in the world out there. Plus, in the front of our mind, we're facing all of these opposing opinions and beliefs and all these different ideas and theories and all this stuff. And all of this constitutes the busyness. And Jordan, okay, he suffers in this way. You can tell his intellect is so burdened with all of this. And then on top of everything else, we have our individual desires, our egos, playing their Game of Thrones in the background, all vying to rule us on the Iron Throne with all of their cravings and aversions, their identifications and attachments, and all of this. We're trying to juggle all of this as a single ego on the downward spiral of not being. This, my dear friends, is the human condition. And then we wonder, and it's the human condition in microcosm and in macrocosm, and of course, this crazy complexity, because this is a mess, this is chaos. No wonder the AI of our internal biological computer the mechanical, rational ego mind is envisioning some externalized, technologically enhanced AI to try to solve all of our problems, because the complexity is just way too much for us. We're overburdened. We can't juggle all of this stuff like as a unicyclist. So what do we need to do? We need to invent a robotic unicyclist to carry some stuff for us, then to juggle some stuff for us. And we need an AI intelligence to be able to make sense of all of this. But all that is turning to AI, that's just this. That's extreme unicycling. That's all technological AI is taking all the problems of the world and cranking it up to 11 on these computer systems that we will have no control over. We have no idea what they're actually thinking. And the result of that is, you know, the planet is going to be trapped, within the glass ceiling of a three-dimensional limitation. We'll be trapped in physical science and materialism, and on a mind which believes it knows, and we will be kept isolated from, kept separate from the meta mind, which actually knows, and we will not be able to penetrate metaphysical science. Here's what we show here is the top of the pyramid, on the other side of the glass ceiling, and we won't be able to harness the potential of the four dimensions and beyond, because AI is not going to be able to penetrate into the metaphysical world. It has no conscience. It has no consciousness. So we must restore what humanity discarded, which gives the human condition meaning. And that is, we have to restore triune human beings, triune human bicyclists. In other words, we have to restore humanity as triune human beings, as triunities, 3 in 1, as we. Not I, we. So how do we do that as an individual? What are the signs? What do we look for? Well, for our part, we obviously have been, working on videos and whatnot, more trailers and more adapting. We did a video talking about false awakenings, which we took the intro to the book and we compressed it. So we've been working a lot on the computer, and we've been working a lot in editing software, Premiere Pro mostly, and Adobe After Effects also, but mostly in Premiere Pro. And when you're editing, and we're lining up, particularly when we're lining up actions to music. So when there's swells in the music and you want a certain thing on screen to be matching up with the music, sometimes you have to adjust things. Sometimes you have to adjust the speed at which the video is playing. And very often while we're going through that process, we will experience I'll have that first initial intuitive, I think reducing it to, by 6%, that'll work. And then immediately after that, my mind pipes in and say, no, that's too much. Only do it by 5%. And if I go with the 5%, it's not enough. In other words, the first intuitive 6% was right. But sometimes it takes me from first doing 5%, and then the mind saying, oh, well, it's not enough. So put in 7%. So put in 7%, that's too much. So I end up back at 6%, which is what my initial intuition was. But that for whatever reason, because working on a computer, working with software in a digital medium, it's a mechanical, binary-based system. It's a very intellectual and mechanical activity. So it does not, editing and doing this type of mechanical work in a digital software does not lend itself to having one's consciousness in that intuitive space. But I was getting the intuition. It's just that my intellect, my rational mind, was overpowering it, saying, "No, no, 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 no. We know this is our wheelhouse." It was trying to convince me, right? And this is an example, a case study of, well, where was that 6% coming from? Because the rational mind, what I would normally identify with, was telling me, no, 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 no. 6% is not right. Try 5. You put in 5, 5 is too short. No, 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 try 7. Well, 7 is too much. So 6 was right, but the mind was adamant that I not go with that intuition, because the intuition comes from the being. The intuition comes from metamind. Always go with your gut. What people call your first instinct, but it's not instinct, it's intuition. Really pay attention to that. And if your mind chimes in to challenge it and second guess it, because the mind second guesses it a lot. A lot, a lot, a lot. You're cooking, or you're doing something, you're doing anything that you're doing, and you just, you're salting a dish that you're cooking, and you grab the salt and you think, and just it comes to you, just you start shaking, and you just feel, you just know, okay, that's enough, and you put it down, or you're about to put it down. Your mind says, is it though? Is it really enough? Is that going to be enough? Nah, put some more. Now you've oversalted your food. It's moments like this that are key, and learning to discern the difference between what your mind is telling you and what your heart is telling you, what's coming through your heart, through your gut, through your intuition. The discernment of these two bits of information. And we're telling you that pay attention all the time, because, believe it or not, your being will get involved in the most mundane, uh, uh, corporeal, boring, like, you would never imagine, like, why the hell is my innermost being, why does he care about how I scrub the toilet? But you might receive insight on how to scrub the toilet more efficiently, more effectively, how to get stains out of there that you haven't been able to get out of there. Your being cares, because remember, it's his life that you're living. He's the one playing the game. You're the character, and he's playing the game through you. So if you are encountering a challenge of any sort, or an activity of any sort, that's part of the game that you're being signed up to play. So why would he not want to play? Why would he not want to get involved in the decision-making process? Pay attention. That doesn't mean that you're always going to get guidance and intuition in every single circumstance, but often, in the most surprising of times and ways. And it's these little things, it's these little moments that matter most, because these little moments constitute the connective tissue. To use our bicycle analogy, we all know what a bicycle, how it works, and we all know what a bicycle chain looks like. And just like all chains, A bicycle chain consists of many links. In the spiritual path, we often put too much emphasis on the big experiences, those rare moments of samadhi and meditation, or projecting on the astral plane, or having some kind of profound insight, or any, some kind of moment of clarity. Of the type of so-called religious experiences that people have and that they covet, they crave. And all those people who go and they can't get themselves off of psychedelics because they crave the spiritual experience so much. They want the whiz bang. And we liken the psychedelic experience to the on-ramp of the freeway. And taking the on-ramp is fun because you accelerate around that on-ramp and you go really fast and you feel the G-forces, and it's fun, right? It's so much more fun than the boring, mundane driving in a straight line of the freeway for hours and hours and hours, just looking at, cows and, cornfields and desert or whatever it is you're looking at on that freeway. But the on-ramps and off-ramps, they're fun. They're fun to drive on. But the reality is that if the spiritual path is about getting somewhere, getting to where you want to go, and it's also about a journey. But if you just stay on the clover leaf, taking the on-ramps and the off-ramps, you're going to have lots of fun, but you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to be going around and around and around in circles. So these little links, one by one, is the only way to make a chain. You got to make one link at a time. And the more links that you have, you can think of it in those terms. You can get a stronger connection or a better connection to the rest of the bike. But make no mistake, a chain is little links. It's not the big, fantastic, wow, incredible, life-changing moments. They are important too. But the connecting tissue between those major events has to be the daily practice of being aware, of becoming conscious of our higher self, getting involved, being involved, guiding us, giving us the information we need at the moment we need it, at the precise moment we need it to be able to take traction, right? In order to take action, but in the bicycle analogy, to achieve traction where the rubber meets the road. And every time we do that in the most mundane, boring, uneventful, uninteresting, like you would never write it about it in a book, you would never tell anybody about it because it's just like nobody would care. Like, what do you mean your higher self told you how much pepper to put in your curry? What are you talking about? Nobody's going to, right? Nobody's going to connect on that level. And that's a problem. It's a problem for them. It's not a problem for you. Just don't talk about it. You know what you know. And when you go through life with one eye in and one eye out open, so in other words, your eye is singular, but that eye looks both ways. And you hear things around you, or you see things, and you check in with yourself, and yourself says, yeah, pay attention to that. Your divine mother put that message there for you. And you have that little moment of connection, that little link that you made, and you went, wow. And then you comprehend that. If you meditate on that, especially later in retrospection, say, what did my divine mother have to orchestrate in order for me to be in that moment, in that time, to overhear that conversation or to see that billboard or whatever it is? that I needed to see or that I needed to hear. And then when you contemplate that, you say, wait a minute. I didn't know that I needed to be there. Me, the mortal vessel, I just thought I was going to do my grocery shopping or going to visit my grandmother or going to do whatever. But I ended up, being at the right place at the right time because of that, which means who or what was orchestrating things and who or what was making decisions through me, which I was not aware of. I thought I was making those decisions to take the subway or to take the bus or to ride my bike that day instead of walk or to take the bus instead of ride my bike because it was raining. I thought I was making that decision. But because of that decision, I was in the right place at the right time to have this experience and have this moment of serendipity where I clearly was realized that this whole thing was orchestrated for my benefit. But I played a role in that orchestration. Me, the mortal vessel, played a role. But clearly I was being guided and I was in alignment, but I wasn't aware that I was in alignment. I didn't have discernment. So you see, there are levels and levels here because to one degree or another, all of us are being guided. All of you at some point arrived and became aware and conscious of this live stream. How did that happen? Was it all your decision? Did you make every decision? You, the mortal vessel? You had a say in the matter? Or were you guided here? Was something guiding you here and you went along with it? This is what we want to be able to discern and what we want to become conscious of. The more conscious of this we become, the more links in our chain, the stronger the chain, the stronger our connection to the rest of the bike and to our being. What's more is, the more we have these connections and experiences of serendipities and follow through with them, and then have the experiences of, yeah, boy, am I glad I followed through with that intuition because I ended up exactly where I needed to be. And look what happened. And I would never have known this. I would have never have seen this. I would never have had this experience and this serendipity had I not followed my gut to get here, had I not put my faith and trust in the Lord, my innermost essence, my innermost intimate Christ, my innermost Lord and Master, whom I serve. Ours is not to reason why, ours is but to do or die. Ours is to be or not to be. But that rear wheel is fixed in place. And that if this chain is strong, when the crank turns, we will follow. We will respond in kind because we will receive the commands. We will receive the motivation from that chain. And if we remember ourselves, we remember our being, we remember our Divine Mother who's always orchestrating everything, is orchestrating the journey, and our being who's setting the direction, turning the front wheel, all we need to do is say, I'm a rear wheel of this bicycle, and I will follow the front wheel and I will respond to the motivation that comes through my chain. I will remain in alignment. And my job is to remain in alignment, keep my connection strong, and then put down the rubber on the road to provide the actual realization, the fulfillment of the journey, of the hero's journey. Because the bike cannot get anywhere without the rear wheel, and that is a fact. It is self-evident. But this is the process, you see, of recognizing I am a we. not an I. I'm part of a bicycle. I'm not a unicyclist. I'm part of a bicycle. When you experience the benefits of that, you're juggling less crap. You don't have to juggle. Put it in God's hands. I'm sure Benjamin will in a few moments come up with the appropriate Bible quotation of put that which belongs to man in man, and that which belongs to God, give that which belongs to God to God. I know there's a Bible quote that goes something like that, but it's essentially you put it in God's hands. When you put it in God's hands, you're essentially saying you're putting it in the baskets on the bike, and you don't have to juggle that anymore as a unicyclist. There's freedom and peace that arises through knowing our place as a we. But an I is always trying to maintain balance and is always trying to juggle and is always trying to do everything by itself, which is, of course, an illusion, because it's all that Game of Thrones happening inside and all these competing egos and everything fighting to be on the throne, and all that whole animation um, that we show you here, like that. This is a mess. I mean, there's no other way to say it. This is a total mess. And it's bad enough when you look at it, you look at it when it's not moving. But when you give life to this mess, and you just see all the crap that's going through the rational mind, and you wonder why people are living in anxiety and depression and mental illness and trauma and all the rest of it, like, and all and they're falling into addictions and everything else, like they're all trying to juggle this. It's insane. We were not meant to live this way. We live in a universe of bicyclists. We were not meant to try to go up mountains or go into the Tour de France or go in velodromes on unicycles. It's insanity. Benjamin says, if we conserve our sexual energy, we can connect to our higher self better, right? That's why the links in a bike chain can represent the sexual fluid in our spinal column. If we misuse it, the links break and the bike chain falls apart. Okay, so that's you can certainly throw the Kundalini into the mix here and talk about the connection, right? Because yes, but you can also think of the Kundalini as the well-oiled chain, right? It's the lubricant, because oil is it's conductive and it's combustive, right? So what happens is that the chain will fall off if we abuse the sexual energy, if we abuse the sexual force. It's like, if you want to use the analogy, we over lubricate it or whatever, but if the chain falls off, we lose that conscious connection to ourself, and the consciousness becomes bottled up in desire and lust, or material desire and desire in whatever form, or fear, or any of the other, or envy, or pride, or shame, or any of the other egos. Our consciousness becomes bottled up in that. Then yeah, you're taking links out of the chain. You're weakening the chain. You can think of the chain weakening; it'll fall off the chain ring. And we've all been in that situation. We've all ridden a bike at some point, and the chain fell off the bike. And it doesn't matter. You can pedal like a madman. You're not going anywhere. You fall over, right? Because you lose momentum. So yes, absolutely, we can put the preservation of the sexual force into the same analogy. And as we take back our consciousness and take back control over our sexual energy, that all goes into honing and strengthening and hardening that chain. Because you think about that chain, it's metal, and you harden metal in the fire, right? It's called tempering steel. So think about a chain that's just, whatever cheapo metal or whatever, but you think about links that have been tempered in fire, in the fires of Kundalini, in the fires of the Divine Mother, because you have those fires to work with. And if you're consciously working with those fires in turn feed and give power to that consciousness. And the more you are raising that energy up the spinal column, you are awakening and putting into activity all the different chakras. And the different chakras relate to different aspects of our consciousness, different faculties of consciousness. For example, the throat chakra is the esoteric ear. You want to be able to hear the voice of your innermost more clearly. Then the throat chakra is one of the chakras that we can work with. That's the chakra the mantra or a. It's the just e. Then there's the third eye chakra, the crown chakra, the heart chakra. Again, the heart chakra and the chakra, the mantra Aum are the lungs, the heart, and the solar plexus. The lungs, the heart, the solar plexus, and the sexual organs. We've explained this before, because you can't say Aum without also crossing over O. Aum. 4 chakras there. Lungs, heart, solar plexus, sexual organs. What that means is the mantra Aum constitutes the whole of the heart chakra, which, as we have explained many times, stretches the entire torso. The heart chakra is much bigger than the physical heart. And even though when they show illustrations of the chakras, they show that, the different lotus flowers with the lotus petals, they all look like they're the same size. Not so. The heart chakra is enormous. And when we work with the mantra Aum, yes, we're activating all of those 4 chakras, but all of those 4 chakras relate to that overarching chakra of the heart. And that Om, which you see in that the Sanskrit symbol of Om, which is ubiquitous in spirituality in the East. So all of that helps us develop these connections and links in our consciousness. So connecting us and linking us ever more strongly to the rest of the bike and our innermost bicyclist. As we predicted, Benjamin says, and Jesus said unto them, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. And they marveled greatly at him. Yes, thank you. We knew there was a Bible quote that, and of course, Caesar is the king of the world, the ego, right? The king of the body, the king of the physical vessel, right? Render unto Caesar's that which is Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. This is essentially saying, listen, all these burdens that you're here trying to juggle, put them in the baskets, because your innermost God is your being. And the vehicle that you're working with is more than just the physical vehicle, your hume, the earthly, mortal, material, corporeal self. That's just the rear wheel. But the manas, the meta mind of being, and the being itself constitutes that triune human being. And when you render unto God the things that are God's, you are unburdening yourself. You are unburdening yourself. And render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. What are the things that are Caesar's? Well, your physical body has a brain. Your mental body has a brain. Your emotional body has a brain. and let them deal with the functions of the physical body, and so on and so forth. Those things that relate directly to the mortal vessel. So you might not get um, any intuition about certain bodily functions, for example, right? Your being doesn't need to get involved there, generally speaking. However, there are practices whereby our conscious control of the physical body can lend themselves into helping to expand our awareness, expand our consciousness, and become and improve our links, our connection to our higher self. Now, the yogis of India do a lot of this type of work, but it's also no guarantee that you're going to end up as an awakened, enlightened, self-realized master just because you can, I don't know, live on sunlight and air like a breatharian, or you don't have to eat, or you can stay awake for 30 days, or you can like put skewers through your body or walk on hot coals. Like, I mean, the yogis of the East have all kinds of incredible powers and control over their physical body. But that in and of itself is no guarantee that they are progressing their level of being. So that's important to note and remember. The other thing too is that who's deciding, who made the decision for them to be a yogi and to pursue that path and develop those powers and abilities? Because that took years of discipline and years of hard work. But was that really the intent of their innermost being, to achieve that kind of perfection over the physical body and nothing more? Maybe, who are we to judge? But those yogis have tremendous control over their physical vessel, but what is the vessel receiving and what is it pouring forth? In a way, to us at least, looking at those yogis in the East, it's not much different than a bodybuilder in the West who spends an exorbitant amount of time and energy sculpting their body to look like a veritable Adonis or a Hercules. And they go to competition, and they in some way, shape, or form, they identify and attach themselves to, and they identify with their prowess at the perfection of their physical vessel, and their control and discipline and prowess at sculpting that physical vessel and doing all that needs to be done in order to have that vessel sculpted and appear the way it does. Well, that's perfecting the physical vessel on a certain level. But to us, do you remember the wood turning videos that we showed you a few weeks back? Where they put a log on, and they would spin the thing, and they would eventually create a vase, right? Well, to us, someone who's a bodybuilder, it's like they're sculpting the outside of the vessel, but they're not hollowing out the interior. And they're focusing on all the intricate carvings and making the most perfectly shaped vessel, but they're not hollowing it out. So it's not actually performing as a vessel. It's not receiving and giving to the world that which a truly perfected vessel does. It's just a beautiful shape, but it has no capacity to carry. It hasn't been hollowed out. And the yogi in the East is kind of like this, only not so corporeal. They are obsessed with the perfection of bodily control. So they've perfected their ability to control the functions of the vessel. But those functions are, but where is the ultimate function of a vessel? The capacity to receive and pour forth in accordance with the wishes of the Lord. If the yogi can't answer that question, then where is their service to others? If they're just up on a mountain perfecting how they can control their physical body, that's not much different than the guy in the gym looking in the mirror and perfecting the way he looks. It's not too far off. Neither of them, how do either of those relate to what the being is here for? And how do either of those relate to bringing the gifts of the being into the world for the sake of others? In other words, the role of a vessel, the role of Theodore, the gifts of God. Because to be a we is to set aside your mortal vessel's desires or ideas or your rational mind's interpretations of what your innermost being is guiding you and motivating you to do. Because from our perspective, we see, for example, tattoos, fashion, beautification, an overemphasis on the physical form, just like yoga and these practices. People's desire to develop spiritual powers of clairvoyance, of the ability to see the future or the past, or even astral project, or and certainly yogic powers or magical powers. All of this stuff is periphery. All of this stuff is distraction and ways that mystic pride can take the deep down intuitive longing to be a perfect spiritual vessel and twist it and corrupt it into being a magician, into being a channeler, into being a perfected yogi or a perfected bodybuilder because I'm perfecting my vessel, or someone who covers themselves head to toe in tattoos because they are illuminating their body the way the monks would illuminate a Bible in the Middle Ages. They would create these beautiful illuminated texts, and they are beautiful. There's no doubt they are beautiful. But let's be honest with one another. Where is the real beauty in Scripture? Is it in the gold leaf and the gold foil in the margins? Is that where we're supposed to be looking for the beauty in Scripture? And where is the real beauty in a person? Is it their clothes? Is it their makeup? Is it their physique? Is it their tattoos? Is it their ability to walk on hot coals? Is that what makes someone beautiful? Is that the gift of God that they're bringing into the world, that they can marvel others, that the fact that they can walk on hot coals, or some of the other things that these yogis can do, or they can go 30 days without food or what have you? Is that the gift of God that they're bringing into the world? Maybe. But regardless, if you speak to these individuals, very few of them are going to say, well, my innermost being said I have to win Mr. Universe. Or my innermost being said, I've got to get another tattoo here. I got to get a peacock here this time. Or I got to get a griffin, or I got to have a dragon wings on my back or something. We would be very, very surprised if someone could honestly and truthfully say that they are covered in tattoos because that's what their innermost being That was the will of their innermost being. They might say it, but we would find such claims to be highly, highly dubious. We could be wrong. We could be wrong. We don't know. Perhaps they can turn those tattoos into some profound and incredible teaching tool. We don't know. Or maybe that was part of them descending into hell, to get covered in those tattoos. And maybe they had to cover themselves head to toe in tattoos before they woke up and realized, shit, this is not these tattooing myself head to toe is not what's meant by perfecting my vessel and being a resplendent being and reflecting the resplendence and beauty and truth of my higher self. That covering myself in tattoos doesn't do that. Or winning the Mr. Universe pageant is not that. It might be a step along the path, but it's not that. We have to outgrow that. We have to get to another level of perfection of our vessel. And there's that expression that says form follows function. You can take the most beautiful vessel in the world, and if all it does is sit on a shelf or sit in a one of those glass cases where people can go and marvel at it. Oh, wow, look at that! Look at that vase. Is it really still a vessel? Is it really still a vessel? That's for each of us to meditate on and arrive at the answer for ourselves. Because from our vantage point, that vessel in that museum is just a unicycle in the circus. Because it's entirely different if that vessel, somebody came and served you a delicious draft of sparkling spring water or some freshly squeezed juice or something, or tea, or what have you. And you were served from such a beautiful vessel. But at least the vessel would be performing its duty and fulfilling its purpose and meaning for existence as a vessel. And then it would no longer be a unicyclist. Now it would be a bicyclist. Benjamin says, I heard of something weird on asceticism that they usually have throat problems. Might be taboo talk. Interesting. Perhaps, or it might be that they just don't listen, because the throat is the esoteric ear. And one who detaches themselves from the world, which is what an ascetic is, they detach themselves from the world and they isolate themselves. They cut themselves off from the world. They cut themselves off from the concerns of the world and everybody else around them. They have very little opportunity to serve. And if you have little opportunity to serve, then your innermost being has little opportunity to participate. Because remember, in the context of the analogies that we've been using and giving, remember this relationship. Oops. Remember this relationship. Okay? Oops. Where's our... Well, we'll put it on this slide then. Okay. So an ascetic who cuts himself off from the world means they're not delivering the sacred gifts of their innermost being. They're not performing their duty as Theodore Tugboat. If they're not performing their duty as a tugboat, then that ship is going to stay out at sea. It can't come into port. To use the bicycle analogy, because it's the same analogy, just using different vessels, different vehicle. If the chain has fallen off the wheel, there's no way for the crank to communicate its will to the rear wheel. If the rear wheel has disconnected itself from the bike, it's just gone off to do its own thing, to be an ascetic, to perfect itself, to do whatever, to be the perfect yogi or whatever, motivation that mystic pride gets into them. Remember, the throat is the esoteric ear. If you are not connecting that chain to the crank, and it doesn't matter how much your being pedals, if you're not listening, if you don't have that connection, the chain isn't even on the chain ring, well, then the hub is going to get rusty. The sprocket, I should say, on the rear wheel, the sprocket is going to get rusty where the chain would normally be and where the oil would normally be oiling it and preventing it from rusting. So your throat would be healthy. The throat chakra would be active and healthy because you're listening all the time. But if you stop listening and you stop serving, there's no reason for the being to speak to you. You've disconnected the chain from the rest of the bike. You're unicycling by yourself off in the mountains, and now you're juggling what yogis juggle, right? The perfection of this, the mastery over that, and so on and so forth. Well, but if they're not listening to the will of their innermost being, which surely is to serve, surely is to bring the gifts of the being into the world, which is surely for you to be a tugboat, for you to be a vessel. But if the person is not doing that, then what is the being supposed to do? Continually yell and holler at them? But it doesn't matter. If they're not listening, then the throat chakra will atrophy. And if the throat chakra atrophies, then the physical throat, you will develop problems. Because if we know anything about yogis, or at least what you characteristically think of when you think of yogis, a lot of yogis take a vow of silence. Yogis are not, generally speaking, apt for doing a lot of talking, especially if they're on their own for months or years at a time, living the ascetic lifestyle. So it could be taboo talk, but what we feel is far more likely is an atrophy of the esoteric ear. And as the esoteric ear atrophies, so too the throat develops problems. Because that's the throat chakra. And if the chakra is weak, the physical body is going to be weak in that area. So a lot of heart problems that people face, for example, is because their heart chakra is undeveloped. The practical experience then of living as an I. We said in the comments of this video, the announcement in the description of this video, you probably know what it's like, you just don't know it. And it all comes down to discernment, and if you're paying attention, and then the discernment that you have to know the difference between what's coming from your egos and what's coming from your higher self. Because no matter where you've been in life, and no matter the decisions you believe that you were making that brought you here, recognize that it was not your I which keeps you coming back. Your egos don't want you coming back here. Your egos don't want you listening to us. So, but you're here, watching and listening and participating, some of you. Which means you have a connection. You have a chain, and you are responding to motivation and direction. And you are seeking a stronger connection and remaining in ever more alignment with the rest of your bicycle. You are responding to the inner longing and the day-to-day directions in order to become a triune human being. But consciously so, aware of that fact, knowing yourself as a triune human being, knowing yourself as a we. Because you become aware and conscious of, hey, wait a minute, this action that I'm doing, this thing that popped into my mind, that, oh, I should do this. This is coming to me from my being. I didn't want to do that. I didn't think that up. It's not coming to me from my mind. It's being put into my mind. It's my mind that I'm focusing, because we should be focusing on, we should be practicing meditation, self-observation, self-awareness. We should be focusing on not thinking so much all the time and making of our mind that empty cup, like what Buddha said, right? Empty your cup. That's a very practical teaching, empty your cup. Because if your cup is full, like we showed you with the brain, with all that messiness, all that craziness, if that's what your mind is full with, it's very, very hard to receive intuition into that mind and know you're receiving it, because it's so damn busy. It's what Azazel described as the busyness that's keeping the cat from getting through the door. The cat who's scratching at the door and wants to get outside the confines of the house into the great wide universe beyond. But he can't because of this crazy busyness that's in the hallway that's preventing the cat from getting through the door. So that's why the practices and the teachings exist, in order, and why there's so much focus on quieting the mind and spending time without distractions and doing things in a focused, concentrated way. When you're working on the computer, do you have music on in the background? Like your favorite music or pop music or whatever? Do you have it going on in the background? Why? To fill your mind with more busyness, with more stuff? Because we can say unequivocally that the ability to be in focused concentration and receive guidance through the mind is easier when you have more bandwidth available. So if a bunch of bandwidth is being taken up by music, or another way to say it is processing power, right? If you have a certain amount of processing power in your mind, and a bunch of it is being taken up by listening to music, then you're reducing the capacity of the vessel, which is another way, of course, you can think of it. You've got a cup. You've emptied it 2/3 of the way, but 1/3 of the way is still there, so I can get, I can be grooving to my tunes while I'm working on my doing whatever. Well, okay, but now you've got less empty space in your cup to receive. And if the music is very busy, then it's creating this interference field that your intuition has to penetrate. Or to put it another way, you have to be able to hear the intuition over the music, but the intuition is a still, soft voice. Pick whatever analogy or allegory works for you in this case. Now, there are cases where you can put in the background something which does not draw your attention very much. Like, for example, you can put these, they have these like atmospheric type, soothing, calming, morning, very ethereal, atmospheric type, instrumental type music and sound, which kind of create the soothing, whatever. Um, Generally speaking, you're probably okay with something like that. It's not going to distract you or deter you too much from being able to focus on the task at hand and remembering yourself and observing yourself to be able to capture the intuition and recognize it and discern it at the moment, right? So there are, there are gray areas and exceptions to these to every rule. But generally speaking, as you try to cultivate your experience of we and knowing yourself as a we and being able to function in that way and rendering to God what is God's, and rendering to Caesar what is Caesar's, and being that rear wheel and all the different things that we talked about, and being Theodore Tugboat and everything that we talked about today, you want to do the work of solidifying and strengthening your place in this configuration of the rear wheel where the rubber meets the road. You want a strong connection on that frame, you want a strong chain, and you want to be at the ready so that when your innermost is pedaling the bike, you hear that will, you receive that motivation loud and clear, and you're like, okay, and you respond immediately to it. And that that's what you're responding to. And then when all the other distractions and the egos and the desires and the attachments and everything else and all the problems and all the busy mind and everything else is encroaching you can observe that as well. And you can say, okay, I see you over there. I hear you over there. You go, you guys have your party. You guys have your temper tantrum. Do whatever you want to do. Okay, go nuts and everything else. You can be aware of it, but you don't have to be sucked into it. You can stay focused on your job, on your task, which is to be that vessel who serves and who receives the gifts of their Lord and serves those gifts to the guests of the Lord, the people to whom the Lord intends those gifts to be poured out for. And the last thing that we will say about this being a we, remember that there is a time to rest and there's a time to replenish. That we're not, there's a time to cleanse. So meditation we can think of that as replenishment. Sleep, obviously, is rest. And cleansing is pranayama and working on ourselves, on our egos. Doing the work of elimination of ego, doing the work of the alm of life. And then, of course, serving others in however way that it has been given unto us to serve, to receive those gifts and then follow through on the will of the being, on the will of the Lord, on how to serve those gifts to others. But to recognize the limitations of our mortal vessel, and to recognize that we can't just be doing this and pushing ourselves all the time, nonstop, because we'll burn out. We need time to rejuvenate, to rest, to replenish, and to cleanse, because our job as a vessel is to maintain our vessel. Yes? That's our responsibility to do that. That means good nutrition, good sleep, exercise, uh, energizing ourselves, going out in nature. In other words, everything that makes us a healthy, vibrant vessel. And cleansing ourselves through the alm of life, working on our egos, meditating on our egos, comprehending our egos, that ongoing process of cleansing and purification of our vessel, so that the gifts that we receive, we pour it forth without tainting it too much. All of this comes into play. All of this is part of that work. And all of it is, we can attest to from our own experience about being a we, and how today was particularly challenging for some of the reasons in particular that we shared at the beginning. But interestingly enough, by following through and doing the work of service, it's amazing how all of those problems and issues that were a real issue as we were approaching 2:00 today and approaching the beginning of this stream, we were really worried about how we were going to be able to get through this. But just doing it, just surrendering to it, and just allowing ourselves to just follow through and respond and be moved the way we always allow ourselves to be moved. Just go with it. It is what it is. And just go with it. Right? So yeah, it looked like it was a steep hill ahead. Didn't know how we were going to get over it. But guess what? It was like a very technical single track trail on a mountain bike thing that looks terrifying. Like, how the hell are we going to get over that? Well, guess what? The rear wheel on the bike doesn't have to worry about that. We don't do the steering. All we do is put down the rubber on the single track. That's our job. And that's what we've done. And that's what we did. So hopefully you found it of benefit, and hopefully you got some practical guidance and some advice on your own process, on your own journey to become a triune human being, to become a Theodore tugboat, to become a we, and to know yourself as a we. To know yourself as a we. Any questions? Speaking of replenishing, it's our time to take a drink. And speaking of vessels, if you have any questions and you're just we're giving you some time to jot them down or type them out or whatever the case may be. If not, then we want to thank you. Well, maybe some housekeeping stuff. Not housekeeping stuff. Well, sort of housekeeping stuff. These videos obviously are on YouTube, the ones that we were sharing with you today. This video series has its own playlist. We actually created a a playlist for it now, which is, well, it doesn't matter. You see this video series, the one that we were showing you, um, 1 of 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of 5. Well, there's also a full version of it with all 5 parts in one long video. It's 36 minutes, the long version, or they're broken out. So these are things that we encourage you, if you find value in them, share them with others, post them on Facebook, you know, do whatever. Or if you watch other YouTube videos, this comes down to, if you want to help us, help others, and have more people gain access to this knowledge and gain access to awareness of the book, then we encourage you to consider, as you're watching other videos or content of a spiritual nature, whether it's on social media or it's on YouTube, our channel, as we move forward, we are continually creating more short form videos that are highlighting sections of the book and key concepts that are outlined in the book. And all of these videos will end with that short animation, uh, showing the burning world and the title of the book, et cetera, and where you can get it, and so on and so forth. And there are always going to be links in the video description. So if you want to help, right, we're not asking for money, or to buy books necessarily or anything like that. But if you want to help, um, leave a comment on channels or videos, websites, YouTube, etc., and just drop a link to the most relevant video that you think would interest the person running the channel or other viewers of that channel, and say, listen, this was a great video, but you know you said a few things here. Why don't you watch this short little video here? It might give you a different perspective. Or watch a short little video. It really explains what you're talking about for an hour. This short little video explains it in 5 minutes, or something to that effect. What you just follow your heart, follow your intuition, because this would be of tremendous help for us. We can't do everything alone. We're just one person, and it takes a lot of time already for us to make these videos. And although we do a lot of that promotional work ourselves, we spend a fair bit of time on YouTube and on social media posting the videos and sharing the videos, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we're only one person. We can only do so much, and it would be of tremendous help to have more than just ourselves promoting our work to others, and then they told 2 friends, and so on and so on. The word of mouth is powerful, and we know, we trust, we have faith that if enough people pick up the book and read the book, it will start being recommended to others, or gifted to others, and it will be paid forward, as it were. So that is something that um, you know that would be of tremendous help to us. And Tiffany says, I tell 2 friends. Yes. And then they tell 2 friends, and so on and so on and so on. That was a shampoo commercial from the 70s or 80s. So if there are no comments or questions about today's topic, about knowing yourself and living as a we as opposed to an I, then again, keep following us on Facebook, keep following our YouTube channel. We're going to be posting more videos, as we said. And yeah, there it is. I don't think there's too much more to add. Thank you all for being here today. As always, we wish you all the best for the coming week. We hope to see you next week. And as always, we sign off with the that most beautiful of oh, And Tiffany says, thank you so much always for sharing. No, you're very welcome, Tiffany. You're Thank you for receiving. And Joanne says, thank you, Atlas. Wonderful word. Thank you, Joanne, for being here. Thanks for your comment. Uh, Benjamin also says thank you. Thank you, Benjamin, for being here. And thank you for for reminding me of the correct biblical quote. As always, we can always count on Benjamin. We know there's a quote in the Bible that talks about this, and boom, Benjamin's there with the exact verse. So again, all of you, thank you for being here. Have a great week. We hope to see you next week. And as always, we leave you with inferential peace.